Welcome to another edition of 12.5 Minutes. My name is Jared Kelly. I'm with my friend and co-host, Liz Whitehead.
Hi, Jared.
So good to see you as always.
Good to see you too.
Yes, this is an interesting time. We haven't had a chance to talk lately, but I was looking at a couple of our episodes, right? I actually watch our own podcast, but because I had some interesting references. I was looking at one conversation that we had about women in business, and then the other was about sports and women. The whole sports industry being changed by basketball and women's basketball and the power and the economy or the economics of what they're doing and changing. And that kind of gave me a thought, which is things are changing. Things are changing when it comes to how women are being more involved in our economy. And I think you probably have seen that too, though, right?
Oh yeah, one of the things I'm a little obsessed with right now is the great wealth transfer, which McKinsey actually did a study on it about the tremendous, crazy transfer of wealth to women in 2048. There's going to be $124 trillion wealth transfer. Right. The biggest transfer of wealth that we've ever seen to women in 2048. And so I'm I'm really interested. Like I think that's crazy in and of itself. And then I'm really interested in what that means for the world. Like what does that mean? What would that mean for women's sports if all of a sudden all this money is in the hands of women? What does that mean for our social and economic systems? So it's something I've been thinking a lot about.
I understand. So yeah, this is a great topic for crazy, scary, genius, and hilarious. So if we get to the idea of this crazy thought about um, all this money moving around, and in this particular context, it's movement by gender, right? We have to think the same way I think we would evaluate how the United States might be different if a woman was president. There's power there, right? I
Hmm.
think that the question that you posed is very interesting because in that situation of money moving in the WNBA, for instance, if those players start investing in their own vehicles and they start looking at how they contract differently with endorsements, like they can be, substantially in a very strong, powerful place collectively, much faster than they can be individually. But what happens with that money, right? So that's kind of the thought process is no matter where the money goes, if it's in different hands, what happens? How do they spend it differently? Are we going to all of a sudden have you know great shoe stores and great apparel companies, makeup? Like I don't think it's that. I think it's everything and how we look at socialized contributions, how we look at even how business operates, right? Having power in the decisions of how business operates.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's so many aspects of exactly what you're talking about, how business operates. What are the things we prioritize when different people are in charge, right? When it's not just old white guys. Um, and and that scares the old white guys, I think. I think because it's not only there's this wealth transfer that's going to happen that's imminent, I'd say, but then there's also the demographic shift, which we talked about with Julie Williams in another episode, about how by 2043, over half of the US population is going to be people of color, right? The new majority. And so I think that demographic shift, along with this incoming wealth transfer, is a reason for a lot of the scary things we're seeing right now. Like this, weird focus on fertility, but only for a certain demographic.
Hmm.
I know you saw that press conference with RFK where he was talking about teenagers' sperm counts. I mean that it's it's wild, but it's also kind of scary. All the Project 2025 stuff, which is, reducing women's rights, right? I think it's a reaction, the ICE detention centers. It's a reaction to these changes of who's going to be in power. And I think that's the scary part is happening right now, but I think the interesting part will come later.
Yes, that's absolutely scary. It's scary because there's a there's a clear effort that's coming from a source of fear, right? And so if you have a if you have fear as your motivation and that's stirring you and giving you concern, then you're not necessarily making rational decisions, but you're in survival mode. And I feel like there are probably several instances that you described, especially ones where it's being said out loud. It's being said in the press. It's being said nationally and globally that, at least in America, um, our priorities, based off of the current administration, suggest that we need to protect a certain category of people, and those are those that have had power traditionally and
Right.
to have a certain demographic, and they are going to the furthest extent to protect it, including trying to get rid of people, remove people out of our economy. Um, but they need those individuals. So there's a contradiction everywhere, right? So you need those people, and then you want to control women's bodies, but at the same time, you want to control them also to produce more children that look like
Or
you.
the right kinds.
Right.
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 Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's bred in fear and anxiety and uncertainty. Because, I mean, I've been speculating. I suspect that there are some things that will happen, but I don't really know. And the genius part of this is that we do have a couple of geniuses who have benefited from a wealth transfer already. Like if you think about Mackenzie Scott, who's Jeff Bezos's ex, and then Melinda Gates, who's Bill Gates's ex, they're changing the nature of philanthropy by with the wealth that they have.
Yes.
Um, and you can look at Robert Johnson, who paid off student loans for an entire class. Um, it's at an, you know, historically black college,
Morehouse. Yeah.
yeah, like this is unprecedented. We haven't seen philanthropists do things in this way before. So I think that's pretty genius. And it makes me, well, it's scary now. The reaction was always going to be scary. Like I've always said this, like the patriarchy is going out with a bang, not a whimper. Um, but it's hopeful. It makes me hopeful to see what's coming next.
Yeah. I I think you're right. And when it comes to genius, the the examples that you gave, it comes from very interesting places, how the money's moving, right? Robert Johnson being, BT, I had the pleasure of actually meeting him in person. Um, his ability to take on a particular topic that he saw investment was needed is very important. And that topic is uh, individuals that are of a certain age that have an interest, right? Their education is their interest. They have an interest, but there's a financial gap that prevents them from pursuing it easily, right? And that barricade or that obstacle of finances, he's helping to remove that in that situation. That was back in 2019. I don't know if he did it every year, but I love that. I also You may not know this, but I grew up in Kansas City, and Ewing Marion Kaufman did something similar to that when I was growing up. And he was the owner of the Kansas City Royals at the time, and owned a major pharmaceutical company as well. Um, he went to a high school that had a very high teenage pregnancy rate, and he went to the school and told them if they just didn't have kids while they were in high school, just don't get pregnant while you're in high school. He would pay for their college education, 4 years of college. Like that type of wealth transfer to a community that is desperately in need of financial assistance, but also that school was mostly kids of color. And that also goes with the demographics of why the teenage pregnancy rate was so high in the school. Um, but to that example, they're very, very important individuals that have access, right? They have access, and their choice of how they use that money before they're gone, I think, is essential because they can change the landscape of a city, a state, a nation, or the entire world.
Yeah, it's a real bridge to the redistribution of money,
Yeah,
of which is essentially power.
right.
Um, but then, so what's the hilarious part of it is what I think is hilarious is in looking into this, right? Because I'm like, well, what are other people saying? Like, what do other people think is going to happen? And there's not a whole lot of predictions, although on TikTok, when you search for like the wealth transfer, there's a lot of people that are going to tell you how to manifest to get your hands on the money. Like I think they kind of like they sort of miss the point of how it's going to work. Like it's mostly people are going to inherit it, either from spouses or either their parents. But people on TikTok are pretty invested in I don't know, hypnosis and different ways that you could maybe manifest that. Maybe some like lunar sacrifices and stuff like that. So
Oh, okay.
maybe they can redirect that way.
Yeah, I definitely avoid those. TikToks. I don't spend that much time on TikTok, but certainly I would avoid those. That is hilarious. I also I thought you were going somewhere else. I thought you were going to say that like the strategy, especially when we're talking about women and transfer of wealth, the strategy is to learn how to get next to more athletes and rappers because clearly they part well with their money. Like they're clearly parting well with their money, and you know, great source of.
That's a tale as old as time.
Yes, yes, that is a great avenue. I thought that's where you're headed, but that would be hilarious too. I'm sure there's some videos out there. I just haven't seen them, or we haven't seen them. But anyway, that's an interesting context, and I think that we should look out for this. And hopefully, we'll be around to see how this works out, and to also see that things are getting better because people with better intentions have the power to change this world on our behalf. So, another great
Yeah,
episode of 12.5 Minutes. My name is Jared. This is Liz Whitehead. We are out of here. Bye for now.
right.